Have they changed the policy in the classroom, do you know? I haven't gotten an email, but I know they changed the policy like in the dorms, right? And then the cafeterias, but nothing about the classrooms, no? Okay. So we can still get the virus. Have they changed the policy in the classroom, do you know? I haven't gotten an email. Okay. I was just wondering, because I guess we can't get the virus if we're sitting around the cafeteria, but we can't get it sitting around in class. All right. All righty. 10 Commandments. Back Judaism. Back to Judaism. That Ms. Blakowitz. Hello, Ms. Blakowitz. The 10 Commandments. I added a couple slides here. So let me get to those. Okay. What are the 10 Commandments? Well, you can see a definition of them, a collection of guidelines that God gave to the Jews to tell them how he wants them to live in relationship to him. So these are 10 laws given by God to Moses, basically. Actually, I want to mention that later. Let me take a note for myself. Do I want to mention that? There we go. Okay. The numbering 10, why are there 10 commandments? Well, there's a reason for that, but the numbering is basically a convention. It's just conventional. You could also possibly identify 11 or 12 or maybe even 13 commandments, depending on how you divided them. If you did the reading and you read reading for Judaism, and you read the two versions of the commandments that I give you there on the PowerPoint, I made it available to you, that would be nice. There you go, sorry about that. If you did the reading, then you might have noticed that if you look at all the commands, the things that God says to do and says not to do, if you went through with a pencil or a pen and circled them, you probably, well, I wouldn't say probably, you would come up with more than just 10, okay? So 10 is a conventional number. How do you get 10? Well, because some commandments are connected to each other, are put together as one command. If you wanted to be technical, you could separate them out and have more commandments. So it is a conventional name, the 10 Commandments. But it's more than just a convention. It comes from the Bible, actually. The Bible itself actually gives the name for this that has stuck, the 10 Commandments. If we look at later in Exodus, okay, Exodus and Deuteronomy is where you'll find the commandments. I'll talk about that in a moment. But in the book of Exodus, where Moses receives the commandments, if you go later in the book of Exodus to chapter 34, verse 28, you'll find where we get that name, the 10 Commandments, from, or why they're called the 10 Commandments. If I look here in my Bible, go to Exodus, I say 34. Okay. God is talking to Moses, and he says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, write down these words, for in accordance with these words, I have made a covenant with you and with Israel." Remember how we talked before about the covenant and how the idea of the covenant is one of the major defining concepts for Judaism, that the people of Israel have a special contractual relationship with God called the covenant. And so we start to see here already that how the 10 Commandments are viewed by Jews. They're viewed as a witness to this covenant between God and them. In fact, God says, "With these words I have made a covenant with you." So Moses was there with the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights. without eating any food or drinking any water. Well, where? I mean, the context is Moses is up on this mountaintop in the presence of God and communing with God, and in that process, God gives the law to Moses on the top of this mountain. So that's what it's referring to, that God is there 40 days and 40 nights without eating or drinking. And he, namely God writes on the tablets, quote, the words of the covenant, the 10 words. In Hebrew, I give it to you on the PowerPoint? No. But in Hebrew, the Divrei Habarit Aseret Hadbarim, the words of the covenant, which are the 10 words. So that's where we get the 10 commandments from. They're called the 10 words. Just like with the commandments, there are more, like there could be more commandments, and there are more commandments actually than just 10. There are more than just 10 words in the 10 commandments. But it's a name. It's a name. It's a conventional name for this covenant that God is making with the people of Israel. So they are called the 10 words, and that's where we get the name, the 10 commandments from. Another name for the 10 commandments that you'll come across is this name Decalogue. And Decalogue is a direct transliteration, is a direct translation, a literal translation of this idea of the 10 words into Greek. This is a Greek word, deca and logos. Deca, as you might know from geometry or your medical studies, or you might encounter Greek words and terminology in your studies. Deca means 10. Deca. Okay, a dodecahedron is a polygon with 12 sides, a shape with 12 sides. Dodeca, do, 2, deca, 10. 2 plus 10 is 12. Okay, triskaidekaphobia is the fear of the number 13. Tris 3 times, tris, and then deca, so 10 plus 3, 13. Logos, you know from earlier in the course when I talked about theology, the study of God. Logos means words about. Okay, it also means, means word. And so logion means words about something. Okay. So 10 words. So it's basically a direct translation of that, the Decalogue. Ms. Pilcavage, could I see you after class, please? Thank you. What are they? They are the earliest laws of the Hebrews, at least as far as we know, and they are the foundational principles for community life. Okay, how the Israelites are to relate to their God, but also how they are to relate to each other. So there's a horizontal relationship going on, people, but there's also a vertical one with the God. And you find this in just about every religion. There's a relationship that you have, a vertical relationship to the spirits or the gods, and there's also having to deal with people around you, so a horizontal relationship. Okay, nothing unique about that. And so these laws deal with that, their community life of the people. The 10 Commandments are written by God himself. They are given to Moses. Okay, Moses doesn't write them. Nowhere does it say that Moses is the creator of the 10 Commandments. And on the contrary, they're revealed to him by God, and God takes an active role in writing them on the stone tablets. Again, this is not, an idea that's unique to the Jewish people. You find this in the ancient Near Eastern culture of a God who would give or write down laws on stone and give them to a ruler. So it's a very similar idea. Why stone? I mean, why is that a big issue? Because, in the ancient world, you didn't have, you wanted something permanent. They had paper in forms of paper, but paper decays easily. It's not as permanent or reliable. So if you really want something to stick, so people you can point to it, say, look, it's there and it's still there, you would carve something into stone. And so you often find law codes carved into stone. So again, this is not an unusual thing that God does this with the Israelites. Now they're given to Moses, but in traditional Jewish thinking, that you'll find sometimes in stories. I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. Haggadah, which are stories. And the rabbis like to teach through parables and through stories rather than just stating like this is the command of God, you must do it. They want to give you a story that titillates the imagination, moves the imagination to think, more deeply, and that's called Haggadah. And I've mentioned that before. It just means story in Hebrew. So we have ancient Haggadah, an ancient Haggadah tradition, which says that God only gives the Ten Commandments to Moses, but actually the Ten Commandments were created on the sixth day of creation, right before the Sabbath rest. So the tablets, even the stone tablets with the law, are created on the eve of Sabbath. Now, you don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to be a Jew or a Christian to kind of have heard the plot of Genesis or the Jewish creation story, which is God works on 6 days and he rests on the seventh, okay? Even if you know nothing else about the creation story, you probably know that. There are a number of sequence of days that God creates everything, different things on each day, and then finally takes a vacation. He relaxes. And that's on the seventh day. Shabbat means seventh, as I've told you, okay? So the seventh day, whatever that is, I don't know what calendar God was using back then, but in our calendar today, Friday is the evening of the Sabbath and Saturday is the Sabbath, so Jews will rest on the Sabbath and do no work, just like God. So, but God, before he rests, the last thing he creates on the very evening before the Sabbath is this, the Ten Commandments, the law, the Torah. And that's all he gives to Moses. The commandments have existed from creation. Think about the connection. Maybe you can see a connection between this idea of the law, the Torah, the Ten Commandments, if you will, existing from the very episode of creation in the book of Genesis, and a religion like Hinduism, which defines itself as Sanatana Dharma, the eternal order of the universe. And traditional Hindus, traditionally I should say, but traditionally Hinduism does not see itself as just like any other religion, but Hinduism has existed forever. It's part of the order of the universe. All Hinduism did was emerge out of the eternal Dharma. So kind of a similar idea, not the same, because we're dealing here with a creator God, not something emerging out of Brahman. We're dealing with a creator God who makes the law, makes the Ten Commandments on the sixth day of creation. But a similar idea of our law has existed almost forever from the very beginning of the world. And Jews have that idea as well. When God, well, this is when I guess I'll get into, oh, I didn't think about that. I'll get into this before I get into that. I'll show you a little video from a movie called The History of the World, Part 1. It was directed and also starred in by a man named Mel Brooks. I can't remember if he's still alive or not. I thought he died, but I could be wrong. But that happens all the time. When you get older and up to my age, that happens all the time. You think someone's dead and you're like, oh, there he is on television. I thought he had died. No, there's Justin Bieber at 83. God bless him. Hey, I'm a believer. Not really, but baby. Anyways, Mel Brooks. Anyways, he's a director and the star in this movie. He's a brilliant man, a brilliant director, very funny man. Had directed and creating such classics as Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, and this is one of his movies called History of the World Part 1. There was no Part 2. There was no sequel. That was part of the joke. But the whole conceit, the whole concept of the film is to tell the history of the world, beginning with the Stone Age, going through, in this case, the Old Testament, New Testament period, medieval period, and all this other stuff, with these characters, the same characters going through, almost like reincarnation, just going through each of these episodes in different periods of time. And so this is his version of the giving of the Ten Commandments in this movie, The History of the World Part 1.
Moses went to the mountain, and God spoke up to him.
Moses, this is the Lord thy God, commanding you to obey my law. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, I hear you. Definitely hear you.
What?
Nothing is punishment together. Oh, Lord, why have you chosen me? What would you have me do for you?
I shall give you my laws, and you shall take them unto the people.
Yes, Lord. Lord, I shall give these laws unto thy people. Hear me. Oh, hear me. Oh, pay heed. The Lord Jehovah, has given unto you these 10 commandments for all to obey.
Thank you, Moses. Now, like with all comedy, not all comedy, but a lot of times, I'll be quiet. Telling me what to buy, YouTube. What is that? Jesus, yes, what? I don't even want to know. Anyways, as with a lot of comedy, there is some truth to it. But there is some truth to that little comedic episode. Actually, let's stick with that picture I have of Moses. Because, Moses goes up the mountain and in his version comes down with 3 tablets. And so you have 5 laws on each tablet. So you would have 15 commandments, not just 10. So it was a longer law. But the joke is obviously that he breaks one of the commandments accidentally. And instead of admitting it, what people don't know, they don't need to know, he says, hey, it's just 10 laws and stuff like that. So that's obviously the comedic venture, comedic idea that's going on there. And it's not too far. That has some accuracy to it. There is some truth to that, actually. Not that God originally wrote 15 commandments and they became 10, but in the story, Moses does actually smash the original copy of the commandments. God gives them to him, and then according to the story, Moses goes down. He's been up on the mountain so long, 40 days and 40 nights. He comes down the mountain and he finds out that the people have lost the faith already. They're like, where's Moses? We don't know where Moses is. Who knows what happened to him? Maybe God took him up in a spaceship. We don't know. Maybe God killed him and ate him. Who knows? What do we do? Well, I guess we look for another God. So, the Israelites start shopping around for other gods. So they've already violated the first commandment, which is have no other gods but me. So Moses gets angry. He smashes the commandments. There's an earthquake and people die. And Moses has to traipse back up the mountain climbers. Can't do too many, I'll be calling 911. Anyway, he climbs back up the mountain to get a new set of commandments from God, which God gives him. So the commandments do actually break. But there is a mistake also in how Moses is depicted with the commandments, because oftentimes, and you see it here in this picture, where he has 2 tablets, yes? This is when he's smashing the first set of tablets. You'll often see Moses with 2 tablets. You'll see this sometimes in churches on stained glass windows, all pictures of Moses. And he'll have 2 stone tablets with the commandments on them, 5 on one commandment, on one tablet, I should say, and then 5 on the other to balance it out. 5 and 5, 10. It's great. It's even, right? Even though it's odd. No, that's not why Moses has 2 tablets of stone. It's actually wrong, or I should say a mistake, and shows that people don't really understand ancient Near Eastern culture. The reason why God gives tablets to Moses is because you needed a copy. And this was a very common, everyday custom in doing things in the ancient Near East, and in a culture and in a time when people didn't have photocopiers. They didn't have scanners. They didn't have cell phones to take a picture of something. All you had was the thing, okay, a contract or an agreement or whatever. And so that everyone involved would know what's in the contract, you would make copies. If it's between two parties, you make 2 copies, one for each person. Or you make the copies on one piece of paper and you tear it apart and give one person has one copy, part of the copy, I should say, well, I shouldn't say one part of the copy, has one part and the other person has the other part. And in fact, if you tear the paper, that's another way of verifying that you have a valid copy of the contract, because if the tear goes together correctly, it would show that, yeah, this was ripped from the same piece of paper. But you could also just make separate copies and give it to people. And that's what God does. He writes out the commandments, the law, on each tablet of stone. They weren't divided up on 2 different tablets. So if you ever see that, and I never really thought about that, but you do see it and you wonder why not just 10 commandments on 1 tablet of stone? You don't need 2. Maybe it's an artistic thing. They want to balance off the one tablet with the other. It looks better artistically. It actually is not, it's not completely accurate, because it had nothing to do with art, had nothing to do with couldn't fit the 10 commandments on 1 tablet. It's that one was a copy of the other, so that the Jews would have their copy and the Lord would have his. So each side would know what they were obligated to. So that's the purpose of it. There are 2 versions of the commandments. Now let me be clear about this, because I don't want you to think that what I just told you about the 2 tablets applies here. Okay, the commandments of God are given twice. The story is retold later on in Deuteronomy. The commandments are given by God to Moses in Exodus. That's the early story, the book of Exodus. But remember, Deuteronomy, as I told you, is sometimes called the second law. It's a repeat of the law by another hand, by another author, in which the story of Moses receiving the law from God is retold through the mouth of Moses. And that's basically what the book of Deuteronomy is. It's all Moses talking. It's all about Moses talking to the people. Okay? Whereas in Exodus, you get more of a story. God says this, Moses says that, God does this, Moses does that. It's more of a prosaic story. Whereas in Deuteronomy, it's Moses talking throughout to the people. It's one long speech. And Deuteronomy as a book was written later than the book of Exodus. But nevertheless, since Deuteronomy is repeating the events of the Exodus, it necessarily follows that we're going to have a repeat of the 10 commandments. So you have 2 versions, in Exodus chapter 20 and Deuteronomy chapter 5. Each version of the 10 commandments is basically the same. Okay, so don't be shocked. There's no smoking gun or something weird, or one version is completely different. No, both versions are basically the same. There are some minor variations and differences in certain things, but it's the same. Biblical scholars, Old Testament scholars believe actually, in point of fact, that although the book of Deuteronomy was written later than the book of Exodus, it was compiled and edited and brought together later than the book of Exodus. Do you have a question? That actually the book of Deuteronomy, the later book, has an earlier version of the 10 commandments than what's found in the book of Exodus. When the book of Exodus, which is an older book, was put together, they actually have a later version. You can tell that it's a later. It's still the same 10 commandments, but there are some indications that you can tell that it's showing some development in the understanding of the commandments, and that Deuteronomy's version is actually an older version, but they're still the same. When we look at the commandments, and I guess I'll start with that's Exodus. I'll start with, I could take either one actually. But I'll start with Deuteronomy. When we look at the commandments, first we have a prologue. This is from Deuteronomy. Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the decrees which I proclaim in your hearing this day, that you may learn them and take care to observe them. Now, think about that. Think of what that sounds like. Remember the Shema that comes right after this in chapter 6. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, or the Lord is one. Okay? Hear, O Israel, these are the statutes, the decrees which I proclaim. These are the things God wants you to do. So notice there's a connection there in the language when Moses presents the Ten Commandments to the people. He calls it a covenant. He says, the Lord our God made a covenant with us. So this is a sign, a witness of the covenant, the agreement that's being made following these 10 rules. The Lord spoke with you face to face on the mountain from the midst of the fire. But since you were afraid of the fire and wouldn't go up the mountain, I stood between the Lord and you. So basically, if you follow the story, it's kind of like, whoa, that God's kind of scary, you know? Hey, Moses, go up the mountain for us and talk to God, you know? It's like, let's see what happens to him. Let's see if he comes back. You know what I'm saying? But that's it. That's as simple as it could be. The people were terrified. So they said, well, you know, Moses, God spoke to you first and sent you to us. You should be the one to go up that mountain into the fire and the smoke and see what's up there. And so Moses did. And so I've come back to announce to you these words of the Lord, the 10 words, yes? The words of the Lord. The first one, which is really more of a prologue than a commandment. I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, that place of slavery. Therefore, you shall have no other gods besides me. So we go into the first commandment. But this prologue, this statement about who this God is and what he did, this frames the commandments for Judaism. I mean, the commandments are in the context of the Exodus event. So we come back to that event of the Exodus, which is very important, and even the defining event for the Jews. It makes them into a people. They're being made here by accepting this agreement, by accepting these commandments. They're being made into a people. So God, who has saved them from slavery in Egypt, now is making an exclusive claim on them. He's saying, I'm the God who saved you, and therefore you are mine. I have an exclusive claim on you, and so these are the rules. I can require you to follow these rules to be in a relationship with me. So he's claiming the Israelites' loyalty in their worship and in their social life. What do we see with these 10 commandments that God gives? Well, I'll just go over them briefly, but here's a brief summary of basically what the 10 commandments are about. First, there's the worship of the Jewish God and no other, this requirement that the Jews will not worship any other God or acknowledge any other God, but worship only their God, this God. The 10 commandments show respect for human life, so respect for parents, respect for other people, especially Jews, respect for marriage, respect for property. There's a weekly day of rest, and there is the idea of honesty in the courts. And I'll kind of unpack these things as they say for you, or talk about them a little bit more. I mean, the first one's obvious. You shall have no other gods besides me. That's the first thing. The second thing is don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. So what does that mean? This is referring to basically taking oaths. And in an ancient society like Israel, and a lot of ancient societies, where you had witnesses, when you made an agreement, a lot of agreements were verbal, if they weren't written down, they were verbal. And there was a process where you would take oaths to the gods you believed in. Why? Because people could lie, people could forget, people could misremember, okay? And then the whole process of making agreements and stuff comes into disarray, or it comes into question. But the gods don't forget. The spirits don't forget. They might not know everything, but they know a lot, and they know things. A lot of them know what's being done in secret, and so they will know if you are lying or if you've broken the oath, and they will punish you. So that's kind of what's going on here with don't take the name of the Lord in vain. They're talking about oath taking, and in that society, that if you have to take an oath in the name of the Lord, that you don't take it worthlessly, or you don't lie about it, that you observe what you vow to do in the name of God. Okay, and by extension, of course, it can be taken to mean cursing, because oaths are there's this process or this idea, and when you take an oath, there are blessings given and curses given. That there are blessings to you if you follow and observe the terms of the agreement, but if you don't, there's the idea that the gods will curse you and will do all sorts of nasty things to you. So you don't want to take God's name in a cursing way, cursing others in that sort of way. But also, you don't want to take God's name in a righteous way or using it in a worthless way. So by extension, it can also mean that, not using the Lord's name in a unworthy way, and not just an oath taking. But oath taking is probably the essential idea here, to preserve community. So you can have a society, so you can trust that people will stand by their word. So if you do take an oath, don't take it in vain. Keep holy the Sabbath day, which I mentioned. Here's a day of rest. Why? 6 days you may labor and do all your work, but you have to rest on the seventh. Why? For remember, you too were once slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you from there with his strong hand and his outstretched arm. That is why the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. So here we get a little bit of an explanation as to, which you don't find with a lot of the other commandments, actually any of the other commandments, actually. This is the one command, it seems, where you actually get an explanation of the rationale behind the commandment. Why do we as Jews rest on the Sabbath? Well, it goes again back to the Exodus event. God saved us from Egypt, and so we owe him, basically. Just an imitation of him who created the world in 6 days and then rested on the Sabbath. We imitate that, what our God did. Why? Because he is our God who saved us from slavery in Egypt. So the Exodus, again, is a defining concept for this commandment. Honor your parents, as God has told you to do. Do not kill, which has the meaning really of murder, as it's been interpreted later by rabbis and even in Christian tradition as well. Why do I say that? Because, after the Ten Commandments, there are whole books of law given to Moses. It's not just the Ten Commandments. There are all sorts of other laws given to Moses, hundreds of laws. And some of those laws require death as a punishment, that the person has to die if he or she violates a certain law given by God. So it doesn't mean just don't kill outright. It's been understood that it means do not kill an innocent person, which would be murder. Don't commit adultery, which means don't have sexual relations with someone who is not your husband or wife. Don't take things that are not yours, that you do not have permission to have. Stealing. Do not bear dishonest witness against your neighbor. And again, this has, we have to look back in the society that the Jews were in. To bear witness is talking about probably the court system, honesty in the courts, because the court system, the system for getting justice in the community, if people have problems with each other, they're claiming damages, that someone has injured me in some certain way or done something. Well, you have a court system of some sort to decide, well, what did the person do it? And then what do we do about it if we decide the person did? That can't happen if people are liars, if people are dishonest, if people are telling untruths about other people for all sorts of reasons. You can convict the wrong person or innocent people, and the unity of the community is harmed. It brings disorder, all sorts of problems. So don't bear dishonest witness. You're a witness before the court. Don't lie about someone, about your neighbor. Tell the truth. And of course, that, again, can be extended and is extended to general truthfulness, even outside of, say, a court situation, where you might have to witness, but in daily life of being truthful. Do not covet your neighbor's wife, and do not desire your neighbor's house, or his field, or his male or female slave, or his ox or ass, or do not covet or desire anything that belongs to him. Okay, so these last commandments, which can be divided differently, as I told you. See, if you go to Exodus, You see that don't covet your neighbor's house. That comes first. And then wife, slave, ass, those are all put together. Notice that the person who wrote the book of Deuteronomy at least was enlightened enough by that time to take wives out of the group of property, slaves, animals. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a little bit of progress from the book of Exodus. Or you should say, if Exodus is showing a later form, that it's maybe a regress by the book of Exodus to lump the wife in with everything else. But that commandment, don't covet, especially don't covet your neighbor's wife, is interesting because it gives us an insight into which group the commandments are directed. Because, well, at least until Obergefell, there was a husband and a wife, a man and a woman. If they were married, the man was called a husband, and the woman was called his wife, and vice versa, her husband. So that's what's going on here. So it tells you that in the context, these commandments are being directed towards males, biological male human beings, wife. So you, a husband or a man, should not be coveting someone else's wife. We also know this from the Hebrew, because Hebrew as a language, and Arabic as well, because they're related languages, the verbs take on the gender of the speaker. Okay, so I can't just say I. There are different verb forms for whether the speaker is a male or a female, or if the person you're addressing is a male or a female. Okay, the verbs change with gender. Of course, this does not happen in English. The verb stays the same, whether it's a male talking, a female talking, or whether a male is talking to another male or to another female. But this does not happen in Hebrew. So we know specifically that each one of these commandments, since it's in the male form, is being directed specifically to the men. And I like to think of it this way. Why? If I ask myself why, because God knew who he needed to deal with. You know what I'm saying? He knew the group that was going to give him some problems, maybe. And so he has to specifically say, look, you first. Of course, that doesn't mean that Jewish women can lie, cheat and steal, commit adultery. No, but they are, it is interesting that they are all directed towards males and male focused. Covet, this idea of covet, and we hear the word, but maybe we don't always define it or know what it means. It just means an unreasonable desire for something, an excessive or inappropriate or unacceptable desire for something. To covet, to wish for something or desire it excessively or beyond an acceptable limit. It comes from the Latin cupio, which means to desire, to wish, to long for something. Also to just simply be interested in something, but maybe an intense interest. So to covet, it doesn't mean to not desire at all. It doesn't mean like if you recognize that your neighbor has a pretty wife or a handsome husband. I don't think it's saying that, but it's that you are so focused on the object of your desire, whether it's another human being or a thing, that you miss what should be your ultimate desire, which of course is God, which is the ultimate desire, which is man's ultimate desire. Should be the ultimate thing that a human being wishes for. So to not be so focused on things. Okay, I think that's what's going on here with covet, that you're not always concerned about how can I, not so much taking away from other people, because you could recognize, you could say, well, I like Bob's house. He's got a nice house. Okay, is that necessarily coveting? I wouldn't say so, because it's not excessive. It's recognizing it's something that you also like. So look at the definition. It's a desire or a wish, but that's excessive, or it's beyond a limit that is set. It's unreasonable. It's inappropriate. It's too focused and missing the focus that should be on God and also what God has given a person. Okay. So again, this has social implications for a community that you don't want people all running around looking at what, well, he has this and she has that, and I will want it too, and why is he making this amount of money and I'm not, and all this other stuff, which people think about, but when you think about it too much, again, it brings in some kind of disorder and lack of cohesion in the community. So you don't want that, so don't covet. Later Jewish commentary, oh, that's interesting. I said that. Oh, that final piece. Well, I didn't mention it before, so I won't mention it now. Later Jewish biblical commentary believed that it wasn't just these commandments that God gave to Moses, but also the oral law was given as well. So yes, here we have God that on the tablets that God gave him, it wasn't just the 10 commandments, but the whole written law was given to Moses. And that somehow also the oral law was transmitted. That's what very traditional Jews believe, like Orthodox Jews, maybe some conservative Jews. I don't think Reform Jews would believe that. In fact, I'm pretty sure they would not. But Orthodox Jews would believe that if you asked them, the Torah was completely revealed, the written Torah was completely revealed to Moses. And there is some view that the oral Torah as well was given to him. So as in the textbook, Robinson and Rodriguez say the 10 commandments are the Torah, quote, in a condensed form. The 10 commandments for a Jew are not just the witness of a relationship with God, but a basic summary of the law, of the covenant that's made with them. Now, obviously, it develops and further laws are given by God, but it all kind of goes back to these 10 ideas, you might say, in some way, shape, or form. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about, let's say that, no. This side, the principles of faith. La-da-dee-da-da. Oh, could I do that? Well, if I do that, I can probably get through it. Yeah, I think I can do it. Before I go on to that, I'm just thinking in my mind as I'm going along. There's a video I wanted to show, and I wasn't sure if I had the time for it, but I think I do. As long as I don't dilly-dally anymore. Da 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 da. Okay. Yeah, I don't know why it doesn't start at the beginning, but. Okay, this is I believe he's a Reform Jew, and one of the branches of Judaism. And this is a video he's made for washing hands. Okay, in this video, I'm just showing you a taste, or giving you a taste of Judaism and what Jewish life is like. They're as I mentioned, the Torah, the 10 Commandments are like the basic ideas of all the laws, but there are many, many laws, hundreds of them. And even beyond that, when you have rabbinical interpretation of how to observe those various there's many commands and laws, you have all sorts of other stuff. So every aspect of Jewish life has some law attached to it. And it all goes back to that prologue. I am the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And so we have this bond, this relationship. Okay, and so Jews act a certain way because that is supposed to give evidence to their relationship with this God. And so one of the laws that God has given to Israel is to wash their hands. This actually is in the written law. You can find this in the Bible. There are no specifics, just that there are purificatory washings that God requires in certain circumstances. There are also some laws having to do with bread, especially the bread that's offered in the temple. So anyway, so this is what this video is dealing with, this daily practice, because there are times throughout the day when Jews are supposed to wash their hands, and eating of bread is one of them.
A matla, a cup with two handles, is taken in the left hand, filled with water. Water is poured over the right hand first, covering the hand 2 times. The cup is switched into the other hand, and water is poured over the left hand twice. Place the cup down, and holding the hands up before drying them, recite the blessing.
Yes, there's always a blessing involved. You always have to bless God when you're doing these things. So just to pause it there, I find it interesting that he says that you have to take off all jewelry, but he's wearing a watch. I don't understand that, but I'm not Jewish. I'd have to ask a rabbi, like, is it just women have to take off their jewelry? They have to take off any rings or anything they have on their hands, a bracelet, but a watch is okay? Or maybe a watch isn't considered specifically jewelry. It's a watch. So I guess maybe not. Nevertheless, traditionally or typically you're supposed to take off jewelry. Maybe he had a wedding ring that he took off. The cup, the natla that he mentions, I didn't write this down before, I'll write it down now, yes. The special cup, yes, you need a special cup. You can't just wash your hands under the water. That's not good enough. You need this special cup. Why? How did that develop? Because you might say, well, the basic rule, the basic law that God gives in the laws that at certain times or when touching certain things like a dead body that make you ritually unclean, not necessarily dirty or sinful, just makes you ritually impure. You have to rectify that by washing, either washing your whole body or washing your hands in this case. So why wash your hands? You fulfill the law, right? No. Because your hands, both of them are unclean. They're both ritually impure and unclean. So to put them under water and wash them, you're not doing anything. You're not getting them unclean because they're both unclean. What's cleansing them? You're basically, in a way, kind of like moving the uncleanness around. You haven't changed the situation. The water is not purifying anything. So hence you have this separate cup where you could pour the water over each hand, which cleanses the hand. Okay, fine. But that's still not good enough because each hand is unclean. So, I mean, if you have one cup, no handles, each hand is touching the cup. Now you're transferring the impurity to the cup. So when you transfer the cup into your right hand to do your left hand, you've now just made your right hand unclean again. Hence, you now need handles. And you need 2 handles because you can't have one handle because the same problem arises, right? You starts with the left, you grab the handle. If you have one handle, you pour the water over your hand. He says 2 times, but I've heard some people say 3 times. Okay, just to be safe, I guess. But you pour the water and you make this hand clean now. And then you take the cup with the handle. Well, the handle, the same issue. The handle's unclean from the unclean hand. So you now it doesn't work. You're like, okay, well, then do your left hand and do it back, re-clean, re-purify your right hand. No, because it's still unclean. The moment the left hand takes it again, it's now ritually unclean. So you need 2 handles, one for the right, one for the left, so that you're never touching the same handle, okay? So that will cleanse your hands properly. And then we have the blessing.
Dr. Dunn,
Yes.
what is this ritual called?
It is called the washing of the hands. Just hand washing. Hand washing. In Hebrew, it's called netilat demayim, I think. I always forget what the word for hand is in Hebrew, but it's just the washing of the hands. Hand washing. Hand washing. Yes, it's good to note that down because I'm talking about it in class and you never know. It might show up on a quiz. It might show up on the final exam because I am talking about it. I'm showing it to you. Now there's a blessing. Now that he has properly cleansed his hands without touching anything unclean, so he kept his hands clean. Now let me just say one thing. This pops into my head now. Some people might be like, oh, religion, and I've heard people say this, like religion is crazy. Religion is just like Freud. Freud thought that religion was an obsessional neurosis. Okay, he's like, well, isn't that crazy? Oh, yeah, but think about when you go into a surgical theater. you know, and you watch the doctors with the soap, the antiseptic soap, have to go, you know, on the nails, and have to do that like what, 10 times over and over and over, and then can't touch anything, you know, and you're not supposed to, like, you can't put your hands under the water and you have to like let them drip down like that. There's a whole ritual behind it because you don't want contamination. So you can't, you know, you can't touch anything. So the surgical nurse then has to help dress you. Yeah. So you twirl around so that they can tie up your gown, because you can't tie up your gown. You can't touch anything. And then when it's all over, then they can finally put your gloves on. And God forbid you touched anything after that other than what you're going to do, because then you've now contaminated yourself and you have to go through the whole process again. I don't know if you have to wash your hands all over again, but you're certainly going to have to leave and get new gloves and whatever, you know, there's a whole big ritual. And but that matters, Dr. Dunn. That's important. That's, you know, you're in surgery, you're opening people. Well, but this is important. This is spiritually important too for people. Just because someone doesn't believe in it doesn't mean that one form is crazy. It's irrational. And another form isn't. Because for some people, the spiritual world is just as important as the physical world. There are both effects. There can be bad effects in the spiritual world if you do things wrong, just like if a doctor's sticking in his unclean hands into somebody's stomach. Okay, so now we have a blessing.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim.
All right.
Shanu b'mitz Eloheinu melech haolam.
He does not give a, he does not give a translation.
Baruch.
So I will tell you what he says in Hebrew. Baruch means blessed. Atah means are you. So you are blessed, Adonai, my Lord. Okay, the Jews will, you probably, if you read the textbook, I hope you did, you should know that Jews do not pronounce the name of God. They have it, they know, they have the letters at least for the name of God. Actually, we're not exactly sure how it's pronounced or was pronounced. Nevertheless, out of great respect for that, Jews don't even attempt to pronounce it. So they have all sorts of circumlocutions. One of them is just saying the Lord, or in this case, my Lord. So blessed are you, my Lord, Eloheinu, our God, Melech, King of the universe, you could say, but Olam has a sense of eternity, so it has a sense of everything, all things. So blessed are you, O Lord, our God, King of the universe, King of everything.
Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam.
Okay, Asher means who. Asher means who. Kidshanu is a verb form from the word for holy in Hebrew. So who makes us holy or sanctifies us. With. Now this word you should know. Mitzvot, yes? Mitzvot. Plural of mitzvah, which is feminine. So mitzvah, a command. Mitzvot, commands. So you have made us holy with your commands. This is the possessive of at the end. So with your commands, and have commanded us. This is not as clear, but the tziv comes from, it's related to mitzvah. So you have made us holy with your commands and have commanded us what? About the washing of the hands, Ms. Muhammad Koni.
Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al netilat.
About the washing of netilat yadayim, the word for hands. So I guess yadai is, or well, you know, yadai is hand, or no, yad. I guess yad is hand. Yes, yad is hand, and yadayim is another form for the plural. So the plural of hands. So the washing of hands. Now you have to do this before you eat bread. So you have to wash your hands as a Jew, a religious Jew, before you eat something, which is not actually a bad idea otherwise, you know.
The hands are then dry.
So now you can eat bread. And this might take some time. I mean, there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts with the law of God. So there's no Like if we were all Jews at a school or something and observant Jews and we were washing our hands for lunch or something, there's no, we all do it one prayer and it covers all of us. No, every person has to wash his or her hands in the proper way, and each person has to say the blessing on his or her own. This can take some time, obviously. So as our friend here, he might be a rabbi, he might not, I don't know, but as our Jewish friend here informs us, you have to, since you've blessed God, there's nothing more to say, so you stand in silence and wait. But if the wait can be really long, like we had a whole group of us doing it, some people like to hum tunes. That's okay, because you're not talking. Now we get to the bread.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Now I would have to ask a person who's Jewish why it has to be salted, if that's actually in the written law or not. I don't remember. So first you taste it and then you give it to everybody else. So the person who says the blessing eats first and then serves everybody else. Shabbat Shalom, baby.
What if you could get rid of the kitchen garden?
Yeah. What if I could get rid of the ads? All righty. Yes. Now, those of you who are Catholic might have noticed something on that last bit about blessing of the bread. He says basically the same thing, and it's kind of a standard blessing prayer. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us, made us holy with your commands, and then you state what the command is. Has commanded us about the washing of hands, or has commanded us about something else. Nothing pops into my mind, but I think you get the point. In this case, he says, blessed are you, blessed are you, Lord our God, God of the universe, because you've given us bread of the earth. Okay, that's what he basically says. And as I said, if you're Catholic, that might sound familiar to you because it is part of the Catholic Mass. When they were revising Catholic worship in the mid-1960s, late 1960s, they actually changed the prayer when there's a point at which the priest takes the plate, the gold plate or gold-plated plate, with the piece of bread on it, which is unleavened, mind you, no yeast. That's why it's flat. Notice the connection with Judaism there, like matzah bread. Takes the piece of unleavened bread and he offers it to God, but he thanks God for it. He says a blessing. Usually it's said privately to the priest. If you're at a Sunday Mass, you won't hear it because the priest is saying it privately in his prayer to God. But unlike weekday Masses, a priest doesn't have to, but can recite it out loud and the people respond. And it goes something like, blessed are you, O Lord, God of the universe. Now I have to remember. Blessed are you, O Lord, God of the universe, Lord our God, God of the universe, who have given us this bread to eat, fruit of the earth and work of human hands. It will become for us the bread of life. And people can respond, if they want to respond, blessed be God forever. Now that prayer was based on this kind of Jewish blessing prayer before eating bread. Why? I think that the revisers wanted to kind of show the Jewish roots of Christianity and also to make Jewish prayer in some way, make Christian prayer in some way more in tune, in connection with its Jewish roots. So they decided to change the prayer and rewrite a new one based on that kind of blessing prayer from Judaism. So it might sound familiar, it might have sounded familiar to you. The 13 principles of faith is what I'm going to talk about next, which is about as close as you will come in Judaism to a sort of creed or statement of belief. Sometimes you'll see them called the 13 articles of faith. Other times you'll see them called the 13 principles of belief. just want to let you know that, because if you see it on the internet, I don't want you to be confused. When I was introduced to these ideas, they were called the 13 Principles of Faith, and so that's what I'm going to stick with. It seems a common enough title for what this is. These 13 principles are attributed to a man named, there on the PowerPoint, Moses Maimonides. His name, Jewish name, was Moses, Moshe, son ben Maimon, Moshe ben Maimon, Moses the son of Maimon, otherwise known as Maimonides, okay, or Moses Maimonides, or Rambam. As I told you when we talked about Tanakh, Judaism has a lot of religious slang, a lot of religious slang, and uses a lot of acronyms, so it can be somewhat difficult at times, perhaps many times, to understand what anyone is saying. The Jewish people know. Jewish people who grew up in it. They know. They have a sense. They know what you're talking about, but I don't. I'm an outsider. I'm just at the beginning of learning. But one thing I do know is that they like acronyms, and this is an acronym, Rambam. He was a rabbi. He was a leader within the religious community. His name was Moshe ben Maimon, hence rabbi, capital R or uppercase R, Moshe, uppercase M, ben, so you have the B, and then Maimon, the last uppercase M, and then you put the A's in between because it's an acronym, a Hebrew acronym, just like with Tanakh, and hence you end up with this acronym for Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, or Maimonides, Rambam, or the Rambam, as he's also called. He's the one who came up with these principles. Now on the PowerPoint, I give you his dates, 1135 to 1204 AD, in the medieval period, okay? But please be aware that as I was doing my own research, okay, 1135 is correct. It was correct. It was the standard date that was given. But apparently in recent years, scholars have gone back and looked, and I don't know how they found this out, but I'll take their word for it, and discovered that actually they can pinpoint his birth to several years later after that in 1138. So actually his birth date is 1138 that we know now. His death date is still 1204. So just make that correction from the PowerPoint. 1135 was the old date that everyone thought, and now we don't think that anymore. 1138. He was born in Spain, and if that's the case, that will give someone one extra credit point. If he or she remembers and can tell, oh, I see the heads popping up now, baby. You know, if one can remember from the textbook, there are two cultural forms of Judaism. One that originated in Spain and Portugal and moved out from there, and one that originated around the Rhine Valley in Germany and spread out into Eastern Europe. He's from Spain, so he must be of that other cultural form that's from Spain and Portugal. Does anyone remember the name? I'll give you one hint. It begins with an S. Raise your hand and let me know, please. Five, 4, 3. It's in the textbook. 1. Sephardi. The other cultural form that centered around Germany and northern France and spread to Eastern Europe is called Ashkenazi. Yes. Remember that. That might not appear. Well, maybe I should ask it in the next quiz, but probably will appear on the final exam. It's in the chapter. Okay, so he was a Sephardi Jew. And at that time in the history of Spain, Spain was under the control of Muslim rulers, and the rulers during the time that Maimonides was growing up, Rambam, Moses ben Maimon, became more extremist in their religious views. And so they basically, the Muslim rulers of Spain at the time, basically gave all the non-Muslims, the Christians and the Jews living there, an ultimatum. They said, well, you can either convert and become Muslims, or you can go into exile and leave. After that, death. So those were their options: convert, go away, or die. Well, his family decided to go into exile, and so they left Spain and eventually ended up in Egypt, where he spent the rest of his life and where he died in 1204. I'll just say Rambam from now on. Rambam was a genius. I mean, the guy was a brilliant man. He was a physician, he was a medical doctor, but he was also a philosopher. He was a Jewish scholar and leader, and a great worker. I mean, he died. People believe he died from exhaustion because he was constantly working. And this is one of his writings that where we get the 13 Principles of Faith from, this book called Kitab as-Siraj, which is an Arabic title. Now you think, oh, he's a Jew, he'd be writing in Hebrew. Well, yes, he knew Hebrew, but remember, he was in Spain, Muslim-controlled Spain at the time, so he was fluent in Arabic, because that was the language that the Muslim rulers spoke. But he wrote in a certain form, kind of Jewish Arabic. Okay, so he wrote the book in Arabic. Kitab as-Siraj is Arabic, an Arabic title. So he wrote the book in Arabic, and it is. I didn't say that, did I? Well, that's weird. Oh, I forgot to say that. It is also known as the commentary on the Mishnah. In English, it's often translated as the commentary on the Mishnah. Literally, it means the book of the lantern. So a lantern is like a candle that's placed inside a receptacle, okay, that you carry around for light. Kitab is a book, and a siraj is a lantern in Arabic. However, when translated into English, you'll see it described as the commentary on the Mishnah, Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah. And in that, it's actually the first full-fledged commentary on the Mishnah that was produced in Judaism. So it's the first commentary on the entire Mishnah, which makes it an important work. In that book, in the Kitab, or the commentary, Maimonides, or Rambam, lists these 13 principles that he considers binding on every Jew. Now, he says, these are the fundamental truths of our religion and its very foundations. So, quote, the fundamental truths of our religion and its very foundations, unquote. Now, you need to be careful with that, because you don't want to think that these beliefs, or that you thought these beliefs made someone not a Jew if you didn't believe in them. Like, say a Jew didn't believe in the Messiah, or didn't believe that the Torah came from God. He wasn't saying that. He wasn't saying that you have to believe these 13 things in order to be a Jew, but he was trying to distinguish in defining Judaism who was, say, a good Jew, a believing Jew, and who was a wrong believing Jew or a heretical Jew, an apikoros. This word apikoros is a Hebrew word. Well, it's in Hebrew, it actually comes from Greek, but this word apikoros means a heretic, someone who believes wrongly, who believes incorrectly according to the standard of belief of a group. Okay, so a heretic. So it wasn't saying, like, if you don't believe in the Messiah or something, then, oh, you're not a Jew anymore, you're out of the community. No, you're still a Jew, but you're a wrong-believing Jew. So he was using these principles not really as a definition of this is Judaism and this is all that it is, but more in the sense of trying to understand, how do I identify how can I identify someone as a believer and someone who's not really a believer in Judaism? Both of them, of course, being Jews. his publication of these 13 principles, and this is my last point, but it's an important one, so I would pay attention, actually caused a controversy which still occurs to this day, because this was the first attempt to introduce sort of articles of faith or a sort of belief, essential belief to Judaism. And so there was a controversy. There were a lot of rabbis and a lot of Jewish thinkers who opposed this because they thought that Maimonides, that Rambam, was downgrading actually the observance of the whole Torah to just these 13 principles. And their point of view was, no, every command, and there are hundreds of them in the Torah, each and every one has come from God. Each and every one in and of itself constitutes a quote unquote principle of faith. You can't just reduce them to 13 and say basically that's it. Okay, which is not exactly what Maimonides was trying to get at, but you can maybe understand why there was a reaction against it during his own lifetime, saying, no, you can't do this. Everything must be taken together as a whole. You can't summarize the Jewish faith in that way. Nevertheless, the Torah was described as a seamless robe, this example of a seamless robe, and you couldn't just take 13 threads out of the robe and say they're the most important, they're the ones holding it all together. No, every piece of thread is holding it together. That's how his opponents saw the Torah. All the commands are holding it together, not just these 13 beliefs. So nevertheless, even though there was a controversy, and even today there might be people who might be critical of what Maimonides was trying to do, the Rambam, nevertheless, it did become popular. It was a handy dandy way of kind of identifying, okay, this is kind of like the essence of what we Jews believe and what we're all about and what we're doing and all the other things that we do in following Torah. And so even today, it's published, it's printed in the Jewish prayer book, the prayer book that Jews use for prayer on the Sabbath. If you go to the synagogue, it's there, it's used. And so now it's ironically, it's very familiar to a lot of Jews, even though there was controversy when it first came out. In the next class, I'll talk a little bit more about it, and then we'll go on to Christianity. So God bless you all. I'll see you Thursday. Okay, hold on one second. Let me just end the live stream. Zoom meeting.